Hey, this is Notser, and we're going to be looking at two developer blog posts real quick. I just want to talk about them, give you my thoughts on it. There's not going to be any gameplay today. It's going to be a short video because there's no gameplay. But Wargaming is going to be changing two maps. I don't know when exactly, maybe 7.1, 7.2. First map is going to be Tears of the Desert. Now, this map is probably not loved by most. I'm one of those people that feels like it encourages the wrong type of gameplay, stagnant, passive gameplay. As we can see over here on the left side, this is how the map is presented. This is a standard battle, obviously, that they're showing off. And there's a northwest and a southeast spawn. And basically the barrier islands are the camp zone. All the ships, either side, just sail up and camp behind the islands, trying to pick off a little bit of chip damage of the enemy. And there's really no way to cover that open zone effectively. It's just open ocean. Sometimes you can have smoke, really good concealment, but generally the playstyle is just stay passive for the entire length of the game. Someone's going to make a mistake and you'll have more points than the enemy at the end. Well, it looks like Wargaming is recognizing that this map has issues, so first thing they've done is they've changed the spawn location. Now, Wargaming has done this in the past with something like World of Tanks, and it's worked out very well there. So I'm happy that they're doing it here. Now, people are going to be spawning in the northeast and the southwest. They're also changing the arrangement of islands slightly. It looks like they added another island over on the southeast side. And they've sort of moved the islands around on the northwest side to be more scattered. And I think what's going to end up happening is the spawns are going to encourage you to definitely take advantage of the islands and move up, or decide to go towards the scattering, left to right, center. You can engage with fast turret traverse. But there's not going to be any more of this, I'm staying in my barrier island, you're going to stay in your barrier island, and there's no way I could cover that ground without leaving my ship vulnerable to fire. That just won't exist. There's going to be more islands and more strategies that you can use to cover that distance and not have your ship out in the open. And that seems like a very positive change for the map. Now, the islands are going away on these corners in response. It looks like they've just basically moved them, something like that, off to these corners. You know, it's whatever. There's no longer going to be an island right off of the east side of the map, where sometimes some camping long range like the dude. I'm not sad that that's going away. I think the most important thing that we can take away from this is that Wargaming absolutely wants islands and geometry to assist in the team's ability to push forward towards the objective or to take out enemy targets. And I think that's really important. Yes, most engagements happen in the open ocean, but let's be completely frank. The way the game is built, it's not as fun as it is dealing with islands in close proximity, so you can minimize the number of targets that can fire at you. And I think gameplay trumps historical accuracy there, where it's like, come on, how often are they really going to fire and engage this close to the island? So I'm happy with this change. I remember it on, I don't remember the map in World of Tanks, but they absolutely did this at least one time where they rotated it to the other corners of the maps, and it just made the map playable and was enjoyable. It didn't make it like way better. Well, no, but anything is better than having this sort of spawn with these barrier islands. It just didn't work out. Next up, we've got Trap. Now, Trap has not really a big issue, in my opinion. I think Trap is fine. You know, here's the old Trap. You've got the center that has a lot of barrier islands, and usually what happens is some destroyer is going to come in and capture, some destroyer on the other side is going to try and capture, and they usually use this center island to engage targets on their own, and they don't overextend at all, and it feels fine. I didn't really have a problem with this map, but I do think the changes are good. So the southwest capture, nothing's changing. The islands are literally in the exact same spot. In the center, they're sort of breaking up the islands, so they don't exist for quite as long. There's not this massive barrier. There's going to be more chances to fire in at the ships that try and camp and use this center island to line of sight most of their targets, and I think that's good. It does make it a little bit more vulnerable, and maybe that's a good thing, because a lot of engagements would come down to one or two ships able to just camp because they have good acceleration, or it's a small ship, and it's hard to get a good angle to flank them because it takes so long to get to the other side. So this little gap that they've added into both sides should allow a good player to benefit from a team's flank. You can hold this guy on the corner and someone would get a little bit faster side shot on a target that's trying to camp this middle island section. So anything to speed it up slightly. It does feel a little campy, but it's not that bad. I mean, Tears of the Desert is bad when you're going the full 20. Here, even the best player who is taking advantage of this center island, it's not going to last that long. It's not going to last that long. Over by the northeast side, this is the sea point usually, it looks like they've put in a couple bigger islands and they've moved up some islands. So it's not a big adjustment for the sea point. It just allows for a little bit more of a safe area, that there's islands that you can move in between. It also seems like they've gotten rid of this giant island over here on the east side. That was sort of an odd trait where I honestly felt like maybe the south spawn had an advantage with that giant island. The other island that maybe would be the benefit for the northwest spawn, it really doesn't come into play that often. And there's this sort of channel here where you could conceivably have a destroyer or two using it as cover. You know, maybe it's a Pan-Asian and they're trying to get in range to use radar. They don't have smoke, but they have this island that's blocking. That could cause some interesting gameplay. I'm not against it. I hope that they don't ruin the map, though, because I feel like Trap is nowhere near as bad as Tears of the Desert. Tears of the Desert is an awful, awful map because it doesn't encourage any movement at all. It discourages it. There's nothing that is more apparent about the original spawn than I should not try and cover this large ocean area. I should stay here and just wait. And it's really bad for standard because you want to defend your base. But also, whenever you consider that Epicenter is also played on Tears of the Desert, Epicenter basically, 2/3 of the Epicenter you can camp inside with the islands, and there's only the center where the destroyers are all doing their stuff, and it's so campy. So, if the new Epicenter version of this allows for more island coverage to encourage a little bit more of a pushing up to get a flank shot on a target, cool. I'm curious to see the domination mode on the Tears of the Desert. Are they going to go use the old domination with the old spawns? I don't think so. I think this is going to be a domination point, a domination point, and a domination point. And, I think it'll work. I don't have any problem with that at all. The biggest issue with Tears of the Desert is just the massive amount of ocean that you needed to cover with very little coverage in the form of islands. And it was all concealment, and it always was concealment. Clearly, concealment is the most important stat, both in offense and defense. And to have a map like Tears of the Desert, it was just unhealthy. So I think this is good. I'm excited to see these maps actually in-game so I can play them. I'm curious what your thoughts are on both of these changes. I'm definitely positive that the Tears of the Desert changes are good, because how could they be any worse? For Trap, I'm not 100% on the changes, and I don't know that they'll make a better play, but it should feel less cheesy at times with those American cruisers camping right behind those islands. in the center. I mean, we've all experienced the Des Moines just camping this area and having the velocity to fire over, but you can't catch them at all. Same with the British cruisers. I had a game where I came in on the southeast side and I basically manipulated this to my advantage. And that's what a lot of people do. And there's not a lot of windows where the enemy can come in and attack you, especially if your team holds this section. If your team held this section in the old map, the enemy has to come out and they have this really obvious area. They have to cover a lot of distance. If you see a ship and maybe you have a friendly aircraft, they can spot that their intentions are to come all the way around. It takes a long time. You're out of the fight at least 20 or 30 seconds as you're trying to move past this island. You can formulate another strategy to counter it, whereas with this loadout, you are probably out of the fight for 10 seconds, if that. That's a really short window where you can decide to completely push forward or to not push at all. So it makes the camping player, the player that's more stationary, have to be a little bit on their toes. They can't just reliably go into the center, get right here, and camp. But having said all that, there was a lot of fun engagements around the center because it was so cornered off. A lot of times you would have the battleships, they would come up these right up against these islands, and they would use the center island as sort of the line of sight blocker as they move into the capture point. Well, they've sort of pincered off and moved the islands. This is very narrow. This is going to be a very, very dangerous choke point if you were to try and transition from B point to C point. It's very obvious where you could potentially be. I don't really think people are going to be like, oh, but there is absolutely more of an opportunity to exit out safely, which is great. So I think it's a good change. I just don't want them to kill all of the fun engagements that occur in the center of Trap. That was one of the iconic parts of the map, and I can't think of another map that has that kind of engagement scenario. And I would really be disappointed if that went away. They might have to maybe open this up a little bit, but we'll see. I hope you guys enjoyed my thoughts on the maps. Tears of the Desert it can't get any worse. So I'm happy with those changes. Trap, I think they're good changes. I feel pretty solid. Let me know what you think. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time.